introduce this, and then, hello.
You heard that before?
Yeah, they're doing like blasting down the street.
Yeah.
We got that. Well,
We
I
got
think
that part.
that may be our signal to start. Would you kick it in?
Please leave that in. That's going to be the beginning of our podcast.
Just blast it off.
All right, now we're rolling.
Now I know.
And so we'll get rolling with this. We got Stevenson Everett breaking a record for the third time on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
And the legendary Garth Fundis.
Hey, boys. How you doing?
Appreciate you being here, man.
Good to be here.
Let's get this thing rolling.
Glad it worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we just survived an earthquake, so we should be fine now.
A lot of cranes in this town. Digging holes.
Go ahead.
You want to kick it off?
Yeah, you kick it off.
We're trying to nerd out. Well, there's so much. We've got an hour, so much we're trying to talk about, but I kind of just want to start at the very beginning. So you were raised in Kansas, right?
I grew up in Kansas on an 80-acre farm, a little town called Baldwin City. It's about 11 miles from Lawrence, which is where the KU is. Kansas,
Okay, gotcha.
Kansas University, about 40 miles from Kansas City. So thank God I grew up close enough to those two institutions. You know, Kansas City itself, just big music town, and Lawrence was sort of like what Austin is to Texas. It's a big music town.
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence, you know, was a university there, and it was 11 miles away, and it was my refuge.
Now, was your family musical at all?
No,
No?
not really. Mm-mm.
So what were
I mean,
your
my mom
first
played
interactions?
piano, taught us, helped with piano lessons and stuff as
Okay.
young kids, but that's about it.
And so was piano was your first interaction with music?
What was? Probably in junior high, my brother, who was 7 years older than me, or 6 years, he played in the high school band, and I really wanted to be in the band, and because they'd have enough kids to do a high school band and a junior high band. They just had one band, and so from junior high on, you could be eligible to play in the band. And I learned to play baritone. They said, if you learn to play baritone horn, maybe we can get you through. And I said, well, I'll give it a try. He said, here, get through these 3 books, and if you get through these 3 books, you can be in the band. Well, I did that in about a few months. And so they said, you can be in the band. So I got to be in the band and do the marching thing at parades and halftime football games. And that was the beginning of a lot of music teachers egging me on and saying, you're good, this is good.
Wow.
You know, singing a little bit, 4-H, talent shows and stuff like that.
And so when you turned 18, where did you go from there?
I went to a hometown Methodist college there, Baker University. I went there for a year and a half, and then another semester in Topeka. And I started my junior year, and this guy called me out of the blue and wanted me to come up and audition for this band that was toured around the Midwest and played in, polka halls and armories and regional stuff, clubs. And we'd travel a good bit between Colorado and, all the way to Lynn, Massachusetts and Michigan. But that band, he convinced me to come up one weekend and just try out for it. I said, look, I'm kind of done playing in bands. I got to get serious about school here. But it was I was 6 weeks into school, and I'd gotten sick with flu or something that just had me down for about 10 days. And I got so far behind. I thought, I'm just going to skip this year. I'll come join your band. I said, maybe I will. I went to the audition, and I met these guys in Norfolk, Nebraska. It was called Smoke Ring. And it was the funniest people I think I'd ever been around. We laughed all weekend. I said, I'll do this. So I went home to tell my parents that I was dropping out of school.
And were you playing baritone or what?
No, by that point, I was playing guitar.
Okay.
My brother brought home, years before that, my brother brought home a $10 pawn shop guitar. He was in the Army, stationed in Texas. And bought me a $10 guitar. I learned to play guitar and sang a few things at 4-H talent contests and such, and then I sold a calf, and that I raised for 4-H, and bought an electric guitar and amplifier, started playing, and this guy came up to me one day and said, hey, would you join our band? I said, we need a lead singer and another rhythm guitar, and I said, so that was kind of the early part when I was high school, really.
So like before that, so what kind of music were you listening to in high school? I mean, what were you into?
Actually, I was thinking a lot about jazz and big band stuff. That's kind of what the music teachers, when you're in music education or coming up through a standard music education in schools, you're taught kind of the way everybody does, getting through the rudiments of it and a knowledge of regular, music. But not too much popular stuff. A little bit of kind of a cousin of country music, I'd say. But my folks had a radio on, and Hello Walls, and and Daddy Sang Bass, and things like that would play in the mornings and on the KLWN from Lawrence, Kansas. The Farm Report's what my dad listened to mostly.
So
but some of that music, I remember hearing.
So what brought you to Nashville? Or what year did you come to Nashville?
In 1971, I had joined this band in Nebraska, like I told you about, and after a few months in that band, the manager came to me and said, "We're going to fly you down to Memphis to put your vocals on some recordings we'd done." I didn't know you'd done some recordings. He said, "Yeah, we did. Some Memphis musicians and a couple of guys down there in Memphis that produced it." And they had a little pretty good success with a band with a song called "No Not Much," and they actually appeared on the Dick Clark show. This is before I came along, but I replaced this other guy who was the lead singer, and so I flew down to Memphis and met these guys. And the first guy I met was Dickie Lee. He picked me up at the airport and drove me over to this little studio where they were working. And the other guy came in after he got off work at the bank, and that was Alan Reynolds.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so Alan Reynolds and Dickie sat there, and we worked on vocals on these 4 or 5 songs that had already been recorded. They got that done, and they said, "We really like your voice. Would you be interested in sticking around a couple more days? We'd like to cut a couple more songs, and we could put a session together with studio musicians, whatever." I said, "Sure. I got nothing to get back for."
Wow.
I got a week. So they said, "Well, we can't really put you up at a hotel, whatever." And it's like, I don't think they were doing so well themselves, but they asked me if I would mind sleeping on a friend of theirs' couch. I said, "No, I've slept on couches. That'd be fine." He said, "Well, that turned out to be Bob McDill. He had a little guest house out behind another big house in Memphis, and that was 1969 when I met McDill and Reynolds and Dickie Lee.
So it was like that was destined.
I don't know. I'm really
some heavy hitters.
I keep looking over my shoulder. I'm really thankful.
Were y'all recording at Sun
things.
or Stax?
It was a little street. It was a little studio that a guy named Stan Kessler had with Dickie, and Knox Phillips had done some work over there and worked with this band as well. So, but I didn't work at Sun or at Knox's, studio.
So at this point, I mean, in your mind, were you trying to be an artist, a lead singer?
I was. That's what I did for a living. I sang and played in bands and was making a living doing that. And you call it a living when you look back at how much money I made. It's like nothing. But
how old were you?
I moved to Nebraska to join that band when I left college. I think I was 18. Because I remember my mom saying when I told her I was going to drop out of college for a year and take a year off, whatever, she said, "Well, you're 18. You make your own calls. You make your own decisions."
Wow.
I said, "Is that it?" They said, "That's it." I said, "Okay."
And then who was your artist that you broke through with as a producer?
Well, when working in Memphis with these guys, and I went back to Nebraska and played in that band for another, not quite a year. But by that time, Alan and Dickie and McDill had all moved to Nashville. Mm-hmm. And Jack Clement, I realized there was this tie with this guy named Jack Clement. Mm-hmm. They had gone to they had followed him to Beaumont and followed him back to Memphis. But he was having a lot of success with Charlie Pride at that point with RCA, and Chet was running the RCA at the time. And so they moved to Nashville, and I was getting out of this group. It had enough of that, and it was only going to go so far. And Alan, I had stayed in touch with him, and just he'd take my phone calls and just chat and pat me on the back and whatever, the other thing, from that one of those songs that we had cut in Memphis, a single that had kind of started getting some airplay. So this label called Sertron called for the album. There was an album call in the contract. So I had flown to Nashville, where they had moved to, and did an album at Jack Clement Recording Studios with Alan and Dickie, and Bergen White arranged it. And that was in 60, that was probably in 70. Yeah.
Wow. So this is for people that don't know, this is basically Cowboy Jacks that would
Cowboy
eventually
Jack
become
Clement.
Allentown.
Yeah, it was the first 16-track studio in Nashville.
Wow.
And I had we record another 8 or 9 songs, plus the one that we had recorded before. And nothing ever happened to the album, but I had that experience of making an album with studio musicians. But there's like Norbert Putnam and David Briggs and Billy Sanford and people like that playing in the
A-list.
group. Yeah.
A-team.
Yeah, it was great. And Charlie Talent was the engineer for that thing. And so months go by, and I moved down there, and at Alan's urging, he said, "You'll find something. I don't have a job for you, but there's a lot going on in Nashville. You'll find your way." A month or two go by, and I'm not really having any luck finding anything. But so Alan calls Charlie Talent, at the engineer at the studio, and he said, "Hey, this young guy moved to Nashville, Garth Fundis, and do you remember him? We did this album." And Charlie said, "Yeah, I remember him. He's a really good singer," or whatever. He said, "Well, he needs a job. Would you have anything for me?" He said, "Send him over." I said, "Okay." So I went over and sat with Charlie, and he hired me to be just sit behind me and watch and learn and pay attention and start anticipating everything that I'll need. So he paid me $2.50 an hour to sit behind him and learn and make coffee and wrap chords and set mics. And I worked there for several years.
So did you know anything about the recording process at that point?
How to plug a microphone into a PA system,
But you'd always been on the other side of it up until then.
Just a singer, I hadn't been a recording engineer. Nobody had never been around making recordings or anything.
So when you started doing that, did you immediately get an interest in the other side of the process?
Well, yeah, it was a lot of fun,
Okay, so yeah.
Because these sessions, Jack Clement's studio was it's like one of the nicest places in town to work. Mm-hmm. And Charlie worked with some of the best people, and a lot of different people, like Donna Fargo, getting her started. Roy Rogers did an album, and people like that. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." It was fun, and I saw a lot of producers and a lot of musicians. Learned everybody's name. Worked there for several years, and learned how to run the board. They slowly kind of took me to school, because there weren't schools for that at the time, And I became like, I could do an overdub session for you, but I didn't. They were slow to put me in charge of a full complement of musicians in the room, which eventually happened. But that's how I started working with Don Williams, was getting to do some overdubs and such, because Alan was producing those first records for Jack's. They were all part of Jack's publishing company, and they were cutting demos just to pitch to other people. Most of Don's first album is from the demos that they had started, and they couldn't really get that many people interested in the songs, because they really loved Don's voice, and it was really starting to have a sound to it, and that became Don's first album, and they put it out on Jack's new label called JMI, Jack Music International, and that's how I got to working with Alan and Dickie in the studio, and with Don, really.
Now let me ask you. So you and Don hook up in producing for Don, what, 70?
Well, I was overdubbing and being an assistant, in the studio. Probably this is like during the first album, so it's like 74, 75.
But when you started producing for him, What year was that?
Well, I was engineering a lot of that, and then one day in like it was '78, we were working on it. We'd done several records together. You know, you're my best friend. You know, couple of those early records, and Alan and Don had parted ways, and Don was just producing himself for one album, Volume 3, and then he asked me if I'd come back and engineer for him, and I said sure. And did a couple of albums with him, and then one night he's sitting there and he said, you know, I'm going to give you co-production credit on this because you're helping me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. Because we'd cut the sessions, and then everybody go home, and it'd be just Don and I coming back, and we did all the harmonies and stuff, and all of the overdubs and mixing. And so that's kind of how I got my first production credit was with Don Williams.
Was your first number one Tulsa Time?
The first, well, it was Tulsa Time the first single off that? I think it was.
I think it was.
Pretty good.
It was either Lay Down Beside Me or Tulsa Time. That was the first time. That was the first record I could see that I had a production credit.
We pulled that up for you because I think it's your first number one with them.
That's right. And
Isn't
it was
that cool?
kind of iconic.
Isn't it?
I mean, come on.
It just blew up, and it just continues to.
It still gets played.
It still gets
Yeah,
played.
if you walk up and down Broadway today,
you can hear
bands are
people playing
Yeah.
it. You know,
Well,
it's
have
like
you listened to the
crazy.
radio station 106.7 here that plays all classic country?
No, I don't
They
listen to
play it
radio
all the
much.
time.
Really?
They play it all the time.
It's unbelievable.
It was a fun record to make. There's a lot of.
But it is the other thing. It still sounds fresh. You listen to it, and it still has energy to it. It's just, and I think that's part of the Garth formula or Garth taste to me is classic.
Classic.
Whatever you're doing, whatever you've done, the stuff still sounds great. You can still
Yeah.
feel the emotion in it. It's still beautiful.
Thanks.
Tulsa Time still slaps, man. I mean,
That
it's
was
people's ringtones.
That
these
song
days.
just kind of came around from Danny Flowers wrote that by himself. He was Don's guitar player on the road for many years. It's just a trio: Dave Williamson and Danny. Dave Williamson played bass, and Danny played electric guitar, and Don played acoustic, and they had 3-part harmony, and that's all Don did. He did all kinds of great tours, BBC and England, and with just that trio, and it was a huge success. But that song was, I think they were snowed. Danny has told the story. They were snowed in a Holiday Inn somewhere in Oklahoma, and Danny had called Dave down. He said, "Hey man, I'm working on this song. I think I got it, but come help me finish it." He said, "Nah." He said, I think Mayberry was coming on and he wanted to watch.
He missed out, man.
Sorry, Dave, I told that story. But Danny wrote that song, and Don, when we were sitting down to start the new album, he said, "I got this thing from Danny. It's just kind of wacky, but I kind of like it, whatever." And he said, "Tell me what you think." And I was like, "That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool." And so the song itself had a different bent to it than Don's, everything Don had recorded previous to that. But man, we put some beat to that, and it just marches along. It really does. In fact, Don is. He thought it needed some foot stomping and stuff. So if you listen real closely, you can hear that. He just patted his legs and his boots stomped the wood floor in the studio.
And that's what you recorded.
And
that's
listen
to. That's cool.
Yeah.
Taylor, can I jump to another song? Since we're talking about songs, or am I throwing you off?
Are we on Don?
No, I'm jumping to Trisha. You got a Don thing.
Let me ask him
Go
real
with
quick.
Don.
Okay.
Because we have some moments we had talked
We can
about.
do an hour just on Don.
I know, right?
sure.
I'm going to do 3 hours
We can come
on
back
him.
for Trisha.
But I do want to know, I want the audience to kind of get an insight into what it's like at certain moments in your career. And I don't know how many pinch me moments you have, but you have a great songwriter, Townes Van Zandt.
Yeah.
And you have 2 great singers, Don Williams and Emmylou Harris. And then you have a great producer, Garth Fundis. What was it like doing If I Needed You with Don and Emmylou in the studio?
Well, the way that happened, I think they were at a festival somewhere, and they met, and Don was a fan of Emmy's, and she was a fan of his voice, so they kind of had a chat and talked about doing something together at some point. And she was married at that point to Brian Ahern, another great producer.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in L.A. that kind of came together by surprise for me. But Don just said, "Hey, we're going to do this thing with Emmylou." I said, "Awesome, that sounds great." So Brian came along with that. It wasn't just so Brian and myself and Don. We share production credits on that.
Yeah.
But Brian was a big part of that record. But the Townes Van Zandt song I knew about from years before. I got to engineer several of Townes's things and attempts
really?
of making albums, yeah. Because Jack was involved with some of Townes's early stuff.
Did you engineer his version of If I Needed You?
I cut it with him once or twice because, he recorded things over and over again in different periods of time. But some of those early writers that were around was Townes and Guy Clark.
Mm-hmm. Steve Earle.
Well, that came later. Steve was much younger.
Yeah.
But he did come along later. But I knew Townes and I knew that song, and I was like, oh, this would be great. I'd actually recorded that song with Doc Watson a few years before that. I did some work with Doc Watson, too, and Merle, his son. That was fun. That was fun stuff. But it, being in the room, seeing that go down with Don and Emmylou singing, Brian playing guitar, and a couple of our guys playing, and Joe Allen on bass and Kenny Malone on drums. It was beautiful.
It's just the perfect marriage of all
just beautiful.
Yeah.
What year was that?
I don't know.
Gee, I don't know.
Is that late 70s?
Probably early 80s.
Okay.
It wasn't too. It was probably 82 or 83.
At that point, had you started to develop what I'm just going to call the Garth Fundis taste? When your approach to recording, what you like to do. You're definitely confident in. Would you call yourself a full-time producer at this point?
I kind of started to at that point. I had engineered a lot of records for Alan, all the Crystal Gayle stuff. I was the recording engineer on that stuff and the early things that he'd done with different people. And I kind of cut back on engineering. It's because it was fun to be in the producer's chair and making calls, and all of a sudden I have a great singer and a great momentum. We have a great momentum, and I can go out to publishers and find songs besides the ones that he's getting from the people that are nearest to him. I started going out and listening to other people. Got to know a lot of other songwriters in town and publishers. And so I was able to start bringing him some songs once in a while, that I thought would be good for him. I Believe in You.
Oh, yeah.
Was a big one. That Roger Cook and Sam Hogan had written, but it was mostly Roger. That was a big lick. And that record it was on the pop charts. It did really well. I think it... I think it was like a number 2 on the national charts.
There's When I Believe in You went to number 1.
Yeah.
Back in the old Billboard.
1980. Look at number 2, the theme from Dukes of Hazzard.
Yep.
That's great.
And
On the road again? You're holding out On the Road again?
Look at those charts.
Wow.
I love looking at
Could
that.
I have this dance?
Yeah.
What a magical time.
That's
And
stacked.
for people that are just listening, we're looking at, what is the date?
1980.
October 18th, 1980.
Yeah.
Don Williams goes number 1 with I Believe in You. He's just ahead of Waylon, theme from Dukes of Hazzard. At number 4, you got Willie, On the Road Again. You have number 6, Anne Murray, Could I Have This Dance? What a time.
Man.
It was a good time. Country music was starting to rock.
That's right.
A little bit. It was great.
All right, buddy. Now you get to go for yours.
Well, and we're going to be jumping around a little bit, but I want to deep dive into one of my all-time favorite songs, and I think this is probably, and calm down, internet. This is my personal favorite female record of all time. I think it's the most beautifully tracked song written by Mr. Hugh Prestwood.
Yeah.
The song Remembers When.
Yeah.
Trisha Yearwood. I'm wondering, how did that song? Was it pitched to you? Did you find that first and bring it to Trisha?
I'm trying to think here now.
It was a cover. I think Kathy Mattea did it first, I think.
That might be true.
Oh, did she?
That might be
did not
true.
know.
I think that's right. I discovered that later. I didn't know it at the time, but Hugh Presswood I'd met Hugh, wrote songs by himself. He lived in on Long Island in New York, the bastion of country music, of course, where all good country music comes from. I had met him, and he'd send me songs from time to time, but I remember having a cassette that had like 4 songs on it, and I think I cut 3 of them over the years, one of them with Colin Ray, and I think Song Remembers When was on that tape, and I played. It was just something I had in my drawer, in my file drawer of songs that I had saved. I hadn't really worked with that many females, and when Trish and I started working together, I had saved this song called She's in Love with a Boy.
Sure.
And that was the first song I ever played for her, just once we decided to work together. So I had this drawer full of things. Anyway, so I found that Song Remembers When, and it was a tape that Hugh had sent to me.
What was the demo like? Was it piano based?
No, it might have been. I'd have to go back and let's do it again. But he would play a guitar part at least, and then some keyboard overdubs or whatever. He had a small studio in his house, and he'd craft these demos as carefully as he crafted these songs that he was writing. Because, out there on Long Island, what are you going to do when you're trying to make it in country music?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he just worked in country music, but that song just, when I heard it, it was like, wow.
It's magic, yeah.
Did
Trisha have the same reaction when you played it for her?
Yeah.
She did? Okay.
Yeah,
she got it.
Yep, she did. So I'd love to sing that.
I'm sorry.
That's your show, brother. I'm crashing your show.
When Jim McBride was on the podcast, he was telling me that he heard Trisha before anyone else had, and he knew the second he heard her, like this, just in the same way he'd heard Randy when Randy was still Randy Tregwick. He just knew this is someone that has to get their shot. I wanted to ask what you thought the first time you heard Trisha and just all the potential you saw.
Well, I was working a lot of projects and engineering some and producing some because of Don's credits that had given me some momentum. And Alan Reynolds was hot. He was cutting Crystal, he was cutting Kathy Mattea, and a bunch of different people. And he called and said, "There's this young girl that down here, her name's Trisha, and she's a great singer, but I just don't have the time to kind of be a part of that right now, and I think you guys would get along great." He said, "I'm going to recommend to her that she call you or you guys get together or whatever, and maybe see if you can get something going." So again, Alan Reynolds entering my life, and shoving me out there in front. So Trish and I got together. We went to have lunch. We did this a couple of times, talk about songs, music, and her quest to. I think she was a receptionist at MTM Records at this point, or had been most recently. But she had started singing demos for everybody in town, and every publisher in town wanted her to come sing demos because she'd nail it on the first pass. And while they were in shock with what they just heard, she said, "Would you like a harmony on that for another $10?"
Oh, good for her. Good, I like that.
So she threw a harmony on. She'd be gone 20 minutes after she got there,
Oh.
But Trish and I met several times, and she had, she was just being careful and not committing to anything. But when we finally kind of agreed to take a shot at something, that's when I opened that drawer and started pulling songs out, and She's in Love with the Boy is the first thing I played for her. And I loved that.
That's amazing. And that was her first single, right?
Yeah.
Was that
was her first single, yeah.
Okay.
I said, "You don't mind to watch the chickens peck the ground?" She said, "No, I love that." She was a Georgia girl, She grew up in a small town, Georgia. But we got together. We did I said, "Look, everybody in town knows you're a great singer, because of all these demos. I've only just met your voice, so I didn't produce any females, so I'd never heard any of those demos. And I went, criminy, why hasn't somebody done this?
Right.
Something with her. She's amazing. I had gone to Douglas Corner when I first met her, and she was playing with Pat Alger, the Algerians. He did this little gig on Tuesday nights or something like that, and Alan and his folks had said you should go see her on one of those nights. So I did, and Pat gets up and he counts off the first song, and they start playing. I'm thinking like, where's the girl? She's not around. By the time they got to the chorus, she blew through the door, got up on stage, and jumped on the mic just as the chorus started, which I thought was funny. But then I saw this beautiful gal up there singing, this gorgeous voice, and it's like, she's incredible. Her diction, her just the way she laid the notes in there and everything was just amazing. So I went up and introduced myself during the break, and she says, "Oh yeah, Alan Reynolds said I should call you and check out." So we decided to have lunch and got together and had a few meetings together and decided to commit to doing this. And I said, "Look, everybody knows you're a great singer. Let's show everybody you can get up and stand up in a room and be the lead singer that everybody thinks you could, that I think you could be." So we went back to Douglas Corner, put our band together of our favorite musicians, and She's in Love with the Boy and several other songs that I pulled out of the drawer. We worked those up, and she had a couple that she wanted to do, and we did a showcase. And back in the days when people came to showcases, and I scheduled it around Tony's time, and also at RCA. Who am I trying to think of?
Joe Galani.
Joe Galani. I set it around Joe's schedule, and then we'll be there. We'll be there because I talked it up, said this is really great, and I called Tony and I said, "Hey man, we're doing this thing like next week, and you should come. You should come hear this. It's really good. I promise you won't regret it." So I got Tony and got the stage set, and we did those 10 songs, and Tony was ready to sign her right away.
So you were kind of doing a development thing with her then. She wasn't signed. You'd taken her on.
She wasn't signed. I put in $1,000. She put in $1,000.
Oh, really?
And that's how we paid for the musicians.
Wow.
And rented the Douglas Corner for a showcase.
So did you have Sound Emporium yet at this point?
No.
Okay. When did Sound Emporium come along?
After my success with
Trisha. Okay.
of when I bought Sound Emporium. Yeah, which was Jack Lemmon Recording Studios.
Right.
It became
full circle.
Yeah. I ended up went to work there in '71. I bought the place in '91, sold it in 2011.
That's pretty cool, though.
I have to tell you something about Trisha. She's never let off being a great singer. There's never been a fall off. Not last year, I got to see Garth perform twice on his tour. And when she comes out from under the stage during the encore and does Shallows, I mean, she has the eyes and the ears of every person in that stadium.
Yeah.
And then she would go in to do, I think one time she did She's in Love with a Boy and just kills it.
Yeah.
The voice is still.
And people go crazy still.
She's terrific.
I mean, Garth sets it up. I'm not. He's a showman, man. He knows how
Mr.
to
Yearwood.
put it together. Yeah, Mr. Yearwood.
But I'm telling you, when she comes out from under that
She kills it,
stage,
man.
she's
still got
so
it.
good.
She's still got it. She's just an amazing person, but she's an amazing talent.
There's something else that she's done recently working with you. She cut an Ashley McBryde track, Bible in a 44.
Yeah.
And on top of having a great cut of it, I love it when the legends give a nod to people they respect that are coming up, so the new generation can know that they're appreciated by the older generation.
And that's what it was for us, because some people said, well, that's a McBride song.
Yeah.
What do you guys do? Well, we love it. And we want to shout out that everybody should listen to this woman.
Well, I assure you, when Ashley McBryde got the word that Trisha and Patty Loveless were going to be doing one of her songs, she was perfectly fine with it.
Probably.
I hope so.
Probably, yeah.
That's kind of an old school thing too, because back in the day, I mean, multiple people would record the same song.
Yeah, a good song. It was a great song.
Right.
Yeah, that's what happened at Stax Records. I mean, Otis Redding sang everybody's songs and did them all better.
That's right.
Set the bar.
Wilson Pickett.
You know, just to budget time and make sure if we have any more producing questions for you then, but we do have to ask about another artist that you worked with, and that is one of the greatest voices of all time in country music, Keith Whitley.
Yeah, man. He was a special person.
What was Keith Whitley like?
Well, one of the funniest people you could ever be around, for one thing. But he had so much talent and historical memory to pull from with all his years in bluegrass. But he wanted, like, it was really important to him. He told me this all day. He just always dreamed of making a country record with pianos and steel guitar and all this other stuff. And he'd never really had it happen for him. He'd had, even though Miami, Miami was really a very successful song, great song, there was still something he was missing. And he and Blake Mevis had produced that first thing. But he still was unsatisfied, and RCA, Mary Martin at RCA gave me the call and said, I want you to, dear boy, I want you to meet this young fellow. He's really great. And take a meeting with him and see if you guys can strike up some chemistry. And I think we did. We had a good first visit, and he said, well, he was going to interview three people, and I think I was his first interview. And he asked towards the end of this, well, let me ask you this, if you don't mind. He said, would you mind finding a couple songs for me you think be good for me? I was like, I don't have the gig yet, and he wants me to go out and find him a great song. I thought that was a kind of like, you got a lot of nerve, but let's see. Okay, it's a test. So I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. So I called. One of the calls I made was to Doyle Brown, who was the plugger down at Welk Music, McDill and all these other people were writers. And I said, Doyle, I said, you know this young guy over at RCA Records is Keith Whitley. He said, yeah. He said, man, that kid's, he's a great singer. I said, I know. He needs a great song, and I need a great song to get this gig. What do you think? Put something. What do you think? And he said, I've got a McDill song. He said, everybody's passed on it. It's like 3 or 4 years old. He said, I think it'd be great for him. Just like right off his head. He said, I'll be down there tomorrow. He said, okay. So I went down to Welcome Music. He plays 2 or 3 things, and he says, okay, here's that song that I first was thinking about yesterday, and he played me Don't Close Your Eyes.
Oh,
See,
my
that's
God.
crazy. It's crazy to think that both people passed on that song, and it was 3 years old. You would think it would be an instant classic like that. That's unbelievable.
The simplicity of it, I think, just eludes people, or it was just too laid back or whatever. I don't know. But,
so Don't Close Your Eyes got you the gig with Keith Whitley.
That and When You Say Nothing at All.
Well, there you go.
I played those 2 songs for him when we got back together, and he's like, man.
Wow.
I don't think he interviewed the other 2 guys. That he was going to, and that's what he told. They said in an interview later on, I found out.
I mean, he's one of the most important voices in country music to this day.
Well, just to be able to match up, and I think that's one of the things that I was good at. It was for Don, for Trisha, and certainly for Keith, was finding a song that kind of defined who they were, what they could do, and what they sounded like. Don't Close Your Eyes, just when I first heard it, it's like, that's it. Then When You Say Nothing at All, it's like, good grief. Paul Overstreet and Don Schlitz song. So, and we had magic happen at radio. They just played the heck out of those songs, and they still do. So many years later.
Can I ask you a nerdy question? And this is a lot of your songs have great intros. I don't know if that's intentional, but like you can hear a song, and the intro is a hook in and of itself. What I'm wondering is, did Don't Close Your Eyes have that intro on the demo that you heard, or is that something that happened in the studio?
It's so simple that it would be hard not to play that way, the way it is. But, you know, it was just a guitar vocals. That's what McDill did when he put his songs down. It was just a solo write, Bob McDill solo write.
Wow, okay.
Which is almost everything he did was a solo write. I mean, he did do some other writings, but it was just McDill, guitar vocal. And we just kind of messed around in the studio until we had something that it wasn't too difficult to come up with those things. But I was always looking for something to happen, because the first thing you got to do is get people's attention before we play them a record. The first thing you got to do is get them to turn it up, and then they listen to the words.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But that intro's got to catch a lot of things have to happen to make musically to make people want to listen to the rest of that song and turn it up and listen to the words.
It seems so intentional. I mean, I hear those intros and I go, man, that was a great great melody line there. It's a hook.
That's also the wisdom of hiring great musicians to come in and play. That band that I put together for Whitley was the first time I had ever put those guys together, and it was Eddie Bears on drums and Dave Pomeroy on bass, Paul Franklin on steel, Billy Sanford. I threw a veteran in there, put Billy Sanford on electric guitar, and Mac McAnally played acoustic guitar.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Who was on keys? Do you remember?
Matt. Come on, Matt.
Oh, no. Don't look at me.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble, Matt. Sorry,
That's
buddy.
all right.
Well, I wanted to ask, when you have someone like Trisha, Keith, Don, these are voices that the moment you hear them, they're undeniable.
Two of them are in the Hall of Fame.
Two of them. And the third one's on the
third
way
one's
eventually.
I sure hope so.
But are you essentially thinking, let's get the intro done as soon as possible to get this voice on here, because their voice are instruments?
You mean in the recording process?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not thinking about the intro. I'm worried about the tempo and the key. And, you know, with a band like that, you can move it a half step, take it down a half step, whatever. You know, I could, from my music education in high school and college, I could speak music. I wasn't a musician myself, but I had enough music background that I knew how to talk to the band and how to get them to, you know, you hire great musicians and get great musicians, a great song and a great artist. You can really screw that up pretty good if you try to put your fingerprints on it too much.
That's, yeah. Sorry.
And I really was we'd work really carefully to work on what key it's going to be in, where's that spot in her voice where the song really works.
Yeah.
And then work with musicians, and then getting around to, if the key didn't happen from something that somebody just played, it could have been a mistake or something. When you first hear it, it's play that again, you know. And when you have great musicians, they can play it again. As opposed to, I don't know what I just did. Some musicians are that way. You just can't. They can play great, but they don't remember what they just did.
Did you ever have an artist, and I say this knowing that there's fans out there that could only dream of producing the people you've produced. Did you ever have an artist that you wish you would have produced, whether they've passed or not, someone that you wish you worked with?
Well, Emmy was one of those artists. You know, I've always said, because I've answered this question a few times before, but Emmy would have been a lovely thing to be a part of. But I just admire her voice and those records so much that she made, and I'd like to think I could have had a swing at that. But you know, she's an icon.
Yeah,
she sets the bar. Yeah, and Emily, Trisha and I mean, we put her and Linda Ronstadt way high bars. That's what we're shooting for here, to be that great. You know, it's just something to attempt. You don't know if you ever achieved. You know, public will tell you if you ever achieved it. You know.
Yeah.
And other musicians.
I think Emmylou is the reason we got Tony Brown in country music.
That's right. He played in the hot band for a little while.
Yeah, and he didn't even have an interest in it. I think she played him He Stopped Loving Her Today one time.
Oh, yeah.
Explained to him the song after coming off of Elvis.
I love that story.
Yeah. And that's how he became country music.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating,
I'm
the history.
kind of surprised Tony never worked with Emmylou. I mean, they were friends. They worked together a little bit, but
Right, all right, after he toured with her. Yes, sir.
yeah.
I understand, yeah.
Well, when he was at RCA doing A&R, and then he was
MCA.
at MCA for so many years. But yeah, Emmylou was doing okay.
What else do you have, brother?
Oh man, I could go. Now I'm regretting us not doing 2 hours because I feel like we're just getting cooking
Told
here.
you.
One of the things I love about your production is your use of space, and I think a lot of that does come down to you choosing the right musicians and you're kind of letting them. You're not micromanaging, right?
Right.
And you're not trying to fill up every gap with something. Is that something you developed on your own? Did you pick that up from just the records you were working on?
Well, I mean, I'd learned a lot from my mentors, which were Alan Reynolds and Don Williams, and Don loved open spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Let the song breathe, give it
Right.
room. Don't try to it's real easy to overproduce something and put too many things in there. When give people a chance to hear what they just heard a couple of bars before that, But it was sort of, I don't know that I'd say it was intentional, but I wasn't afraid of it. And I would just let it happen. Somebody said, we need to fill something there. I said, no, let's just leave it. I've made that comment a few times in my career.
I love that though. I mean, I think that's what separates a lot of these. We were talking earlier, classic, timeless songs.
Mm-hmm.
Everything today is just so jammed full of stuff, trying to get as much energy and sound as they can. But these old songs are so. I mean, they when you listen to them, they let you breathe.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a calming experience listening to a song that just opens up like that. And plus, when you have those voices. Like, let those voices be the space.
Exactly.
I mean, and give you a second to process the resonance, process the lyric, process what is happening. It's so hypnotic and beautiful. And that, I think at the end of the day, for me, that's, I'm using you as a third person. That's Garth Fundis, The Strongest Suit. Is your taste. You know just what's enough, just the right amount of sauce. And I think it's beautiful. And I'm such a fan.
One of the things I've tried to tell, when I have told young singers and other people that I've worked with, it's like, trust the song.
That's good advice.
Pick great song and trust the song.
Yeah.
You're picking it for a melody, a message, or whatever it is. You fill it up with too much garbage. It's, you can't emote so much that it overtakes your effort. You can oversing something really easily.
Listen, last time he was on the podcast, we had a whole conversation about my desire to see someone release what we call a voice memo album, where it's just them doing their rough vocal and guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's in the same spirit of what we heard from Keith Whitley with Tell Lori I Love Her after he passed.
Right.
I love it when someone just sits down and gives me their true, authentic self singing, rather than all this, because it's gotten to the point now where it's way overproduced, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of the new age music.
I've made efforts and I've asked to, I haven't pulled it off. Maybe there's one more thing I can do. I'd love to go back to those Whitley records and pull those, pull all the faders down except for that voice.
Yes.
Wow.
We've heard Marvin Gaye and people like that. You've heard those voices out there. Keith's one of those guys I'd love to hear.
Oh man, that
Doing
would be
something like
that'd be
that.
something
To go back and then maybe just leave the acoustic guitar in there with that vocal.
As someone who's been so instrumental in the sound of country music, what do you think about what's going on right now these days with a lot of overproduced AI influenced music? Have you warmed up to it, or do you have issues?
No, I don't have issues. I have my taste, like everybody has. Things I like, things like move on to another station or move on to another song. That doesn't interest me. I'm happy for them having this success. But it's kind of gotten back to, I think, the music from the commercial standpoint is, you know, in the 50s, it was a transistor radio, man. It sounded like shit. But if that beat came through, if that message came through, and that melody came through, that's all you needed, you know? And, you know, Chuck Berry is like, man, that's just pure talent.
Yep.
You know, and stomping out some kind of message in some song that just, you can't deny it, you know? I think there's a lot of that going on. You know, you can't, like Shabuzi record. I mean, it's just, you may like it or not, you may just like the name, but you know, some of those records they're just kind of fun.
Infectious.
To listen. Yeah. That's, you know, it's not all about art, you know.
Well, but in a way, that stuff is art.
Yeah,
in its own
well,
way.
and I don't mean to criticize it that it's not either. It is art. You're right. It's just some people's taste is different from others. That's all.
I was just listening to Your Cheating Heart by Hank on the Greatest Hits album, and I just, when I hear, you know, it's supposed to be like modern day kids comparing their, what are they on now? Nintendo, what's the Xbox compared to a Nintendo or an Atari.
Right.
But just the sound is so beautiful because it's the vocal out front. It's a great song. It's a great lyric. And the production value is not what it is today, but it hits more for me.
It's, you know, that's, you got to connect with people.
Yeah.
You got to connect with their ears.
Let's do these lists. I'm worried we're going to run out of time.
Okay.
We got
7 minutes.
Oh, we got 7 minutes.
So this is
Okay.
going to be uncomfortable for Garth. I don't know why we're doing this to
great.
him.
Let's do
but
it.
we're gonna fanboy over his career because Stevenson wanted to do top 5
this is me.
songs.
If this goes south, this is my fault.
Right. So in case we clip this, top 5 songs.
Top 5
produced-
Garth Fundis songs.
Oh, my
Right.
gosh.
You want me to kick it off?
You kick it
All right,
off.
I'll kick off. I'm gonna kick off with a Don Williams song. I think my favorite Don Williams songs is "We Got a Good Fire Going," written by Dave Loggins. And
Yeah.
I had a question: is that Dave Loggins playing the acoustic?
Yes.
Okay.
And
I
he
thought it
sang,
had to
and
be.
he sang harmonies.
Okay, because it's got those really Dave Loggins-y
Yeah.
chords at the top of that. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, what you got?
Oh, we're going to go one for one?
Let's go. We can go one for one.
Lord, I hope this day is good.
That's a good one.
That's what, you want me to talk about that? Or
If you want to.
Oh, it's a great song.
a great song.
Dave Hanner, I think, from Corbin Hanner Band, who was the name of their group, duet. And we cut a couple of his songs along the way, but that was a surprise when Don and I sat down to listen to songs one day. He said, "I got this thing from Dave Hanner." He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh man, I love that."
Yeah.
And when the day we cut it, Pat McLaughlin, who I mentioned earlier today when we were talking, but Pat McLaughlin was doing a lot of gigs playing mandolin at the Bluebird, and he had this funky way of doing the mandolin stuff. You know, really cool, really talented guy. And he had this song that we were cutting while Pat was Pat was sitting in the control room with me. We were going to get to his song next, and we started working on "Lord, I Hope This Day Is Good." And I said, "You know what, Don?" I said, "Pat plays mandolin great." I said, "It might be fun to have him." He said, "Well, bring him on in. Let's just give it a go." So that's Pat McLaughlin playing that funky mandolin part on "Lord, I Hope This Day Is Good." It just made it.
Well, I'll just say this because he knows the story, and I don't want to waste time, so we don't have much time, but I have a deep emotional connection to that song, so I appreciate you for the arrangement.
Oh, great.
Man, yeah. I tell you, I'll just give my next 4.
Go
'cause I
give
wanna
your
make
next
sure.
4.
I'm going to throw in an artist we haven't talked about. An artist I grew up loving. Another great singer, Colin Ray. He's got a song called "That Was a River."
Yeah.
That, I mean, even as a little kid, and I was in middle school when that album came out, I loved that whole album, but I loved that song. I loved his vocal, and when I listen to it now, I'm thinking, man, that song,
Yeah.
again, it's just classic. It's a great one. I got to go to
There was another Hugh Presswood song.
man, Hugh Press was on a lot of these conversations.
Maybe, I think so.
I'm going to defer to you on that. I'm going to let's go with I have so many Trishas. I'm going to throw in a random Trisha song. I wonder if you know remember the song "Dreaming Fields" by Matraca Berg and Gary Harrison, which is kind of later in her catalog. And speaking of that combo, had a lot of Trisha songs, "Wrong Side of Memphis." That song, listen to that song, everybody. "Dreaming Fields," Trisha Yearwood. it's so cinematic, and I don't know why it makes me emotional every time I hear that song. Have you heard Dreaming Fields? Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
it's a beautiful, beautiful
it's
song.
like an epic.
It's a long time since I've heard that song.
Well,
but
listen to it.
It is beautiful. But Trisha and I were so captivated by it, and I think Matricia had put it on Matricia. There we go.
Trisha, there you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Slipping
It's a new
up here.
duo.
Anyway, Matricia had recorded this gorgeous version of it, I think, for an album that she had done. And it was one of those songs that we just wanted to lift up. This may never go anywhere, may not be a single. It was just a gorgeous song we'd love to have a go at, so we did. And we, it's not a whole lot different than Matricia's version, but it's Trisha Yearwood singing it.
It'll make you breathless. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful one. It's your show, man. Throw a
Okay,
couple out.
between an old, I'll just because we're getting down to time, and I want y'all to promote between an old memory and me. I've already said, Lord, I hope this day is good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no stranger to the rain.
Yeah, man.
Good old boys like me.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't said it yet, so I'll
I know
say
you're gonna say it. You're gonna
Trisha, Walk Away
Walk Away, Joe.
because it's a great song, and you gave Matthew McConaughey his first acting gig.
Well, I didn't cast him in the video, but that was
He has
funny.
his career to go.
That
I'm
was
just
funny
making
that
jokes.
he got. Yeah, we have this young guy that's just starting out his career. He's going to come be the love interest.
So yeah, just read the three, and then we can, if you have anything to promote, we'll
A
do that real
quick
quick.
story on Walk Away Joe.
Yeah,
if you want to,
please.
I heard that for the first time at a Bluebird gig. It was a songwriters night, and these guys got up and Pat. Oh no! Now I'm gonna wish I hadn't brought this up because I'm gonna forget names. The publisher was having a songwriter night. And one of his writers had played that song, and I went back to him. I said, "Man, I got to have that song for Trisha." He said, "What's on hold for the Judds?" I'm sorry. I said, "Oh no!"
Oh God.
So I heard it again a couple days later, and it's just eating me up. So the next week I called up. I said, "Hey man, they let that song go yet?" Because they're not going to do it. They would have called. He said, "No, it's still on hold." And I said, and about a week later, there was an announcement that the Judds were breaking up, and Winona was going to go her own way. And I called him about that. So now it's not on hold anymore, is it? He said, "Well, Winona's put it on hold." So but eventually, I would go. In the meantime, I'd played the song for Trisha. And she said, "I don't know. I'd have to try it. I'm not sure." I said, "Wow." I said, "I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect."
The song was born for her to sing.
And so I called Pat and I said, "Man, she's she loved I played the song for her." And he said, "Well, really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What'd she say?" I said, "She loves it." I said, "She loves it. She wants to cut it." And he said,
will love
"Well, it's
it,
still
yeah."
on hold for Winona." I said, "Well, let me know if something changes." And well, a week or two later, he called and said, "Well, you can have that song if you want."
Wow.
She's let it go.
Thank goodness, man.
Man, you got Trisha. You got her
iconic.
that song by the Judds breaking up, and you got Trisha because Alan was too busy. So
I know.
it's always about being in the right place
Being
at
in
the
the
right
right
time.
place at the right time, man.
Well, listen, I apologize, but we ran out of time. Do you have anything you want to promote?
Oh no, Country Drive podcast. Listen to go back and listen to those Trisha Yearwood, Keith Whitley,
Yeah,
Don
man.
Williams records. Man, I'm telling you, they're just some of the best stuff that's ever been made out of Nashville. And Garth, we're just glad you sat across the table
Thanks,
from us.
Steve.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's been an honor.
Thanks,
been an honor,
Taylor.
Garth.
It's been fun.
I appreciate you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, bye, y'all.
There you go.